All right, welcome everyone. It is Wednesday. It's 4:30 p.m. Central Time, Chicago time. It means it's office hours here on the Academy. This is where you can ask questions on pretty much anything related to MDT, Intune, ConfigMgr, Azure, PowerShell, you name it, and also where we provide an update every week about what's going on in the in our little IT industry. So. Let's get going. Hey there, Andrew. Good to have you back.
Yes, good to see you.
How are things?
Oh, it's Wednesday, so it's office hours. It's Mandalorian Day. Everything is right in the world.
Sounds good. And we even have almost spring today. It was amazing. It feels good.
So close. Yes.
So close, yeah. All right. So what happened last week?
So came across a few things, a couple small tips, a couple scripts that I came across over the last week that I would be happy to share if you'd like to share my screen.
That magic button press. I'll do
Yes.
it. All right.
Thank you, sir. So one thing I came across that many of you may have seen already is that Microsoft pushed out a couple of PowerShell scripts to fix a BitLocker bypass vulnerability that was in the Windows recovery environment. So there are two different scripts. One that targets devices that are running Windows 10 2004 and later, including Windows 11. And there's a second script aimed at Windows 10 version 1909 or earlier. So if you still need to deal with this, these scripts should make things a little bit easier for you.
I would probably like to add there, if you're still on Windows 10 1909, this script is probably the least of your troubles. A more important one is that you've been out of support for almost a year, and there haven't been any updates in 8-9 months. It expired in May last year, so
Fantastic addition, yes. Skip the script, go upgrade.
And then run the script.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
All right, a small MS Docs update that our friend Matthias came across here. Turned out the docs for Windows Autopilot said for quite a while, as it turns out, that there was a limitation of 1,000 devices that you could have in a CSV that you were using to upload the hardware hash to import devices. Turned out the limit has been 500 for some time. And one of our other friends, Mike Maribel, mentioned that he was the one that just finally submitted a change to the docs. So always happy to see those little official doc updates for sure. Came across a tweet that I have not happened to see this in my tenants yet, but Peter here noticed, and we've seen some other reports, that there are some users using Intune's feature update policies. They are having their Windows devices upgrading to a higher version than they actually have configured in the feature update policy. So something to look out for in your organizations if you are seeing some interesting or less optimal upgrades happening when you don't want them to. I would take a look in your service health dashboard and see if you see this message for your tenant. Like I said, I didn't happen to see it. Did you happen to come across it in any of yours, Johan?
No, and none of my customers yet, but I saw a few replies to this thread where organizations basically have 50% of their computers upgrading, like bam.
Wow.
And an interesting part in the Windows 11 case is that it's not an enablement packet, it's actually a full in-place upgrade, so the user will be interrupted for a bit. I mean, at best half an hour, but more realistically, an hour and a half. And that's assuming that the machine can download the content in a reasonable time. because it's still a full image coming down to do this. So yeah, not ideal.
Definitely not, especially when you're setting a policy that you're expecting to control in a way that works for you. This can be surprising, I think, both to the users and the administrators. So keep an eye out for that. A couple more things here that I wanted to share. Many of you may have heard that there was a pretty nasty Outlook vulnerability that came out last week, and there was a lot of questions surrounding how do we expedite the updates for Office. And there was a lot of great responses on how to actually control updates for Office in Intune, for example. But Nikla Suter here put out some examples for proactive remediations that help enforce the latest O365 update. So this can actually help you expedite and get those updates out there sooner. We don't really have any other mechanism in Intune that I've come across to make this happen. So I wanted to call this out. I haven't used this myself just yet, but I've seen a lot of great responses here on Twitter as well as on the gist that he has here on GitHub. A lot of great comments and conversations around this script. And this is sort of what I keep coming across as what people are using right now to expedite that update if you're on Intune. And then last but certainly not least, a quick tip I saw here from Panu had a ConfigMgr CM Pivot query to find installed .NET framework versions across a set of devices in a collection. So I just thought this was a nice, useful query to share out there. Try to collect these as much as we can and keep them available. So thank you for sharing that. But that was about what I had for today.
All right, I did make a note of a few things as well. So let me see if I can steal the screen back here. A bit too many windows open, so getting rid of this one and bringing in this one here. This is not the one I'm going to show. This was just some notes from the class, and I stumbled across a blog post from Niall Brady. He runs the Windows Noob site, as most of you have most likely stumbled across over the years. But a scripted solution on assigning group tags to Autopilot registered devices. I thought that was a pretty elegant script that I wanted to share. If you haven't seen it, good stuff right there. Thank you, Niall, for putting that together. And then we, of course, have the shiniest of shiny PowerShell modules being released this week. Or was it 2 days ago, 3 days ago? David Brook has been instrumental in researching the new driver and firmware servicing feature from Microsoft, part of the deployment service, but he released a PowerShell module that simplifies management a lot of that, because as you probably know, Microsoft have no real user interface for it yet. They have a sample application that you can download, quite limited, but this really enhances the way you can integrate with this through this module. So making it very, very easy to create policies and even approve content for this kind of the service. So I haven't had a chance to play around with it yet, but I have seen many of its existing work, so I have very high hopes. So that will be a weekend project for sure. Good stuff. Thank you, David. And then in other news, I got some new toys that I'm pretty happy with. First, we needed some extra labs, extra machines for our classrooms, so we ended up ordering a few. Where the heck did I put that one? I put it over here. Optiplex 7060s. micro, so they're tiny. But if you buy the right module from Crucial, memory module, you can actually bump up those to 64 gig of memory. The CPU is still okay, only 6 cores, but it was nice to see. Because if you go to the Dell website, it's like, no, 32 is max, but like, no, you can have more. And that machine was about $250 or $280 or something like that dollars on eBay, plus the $150 for the memory. No, not 150, 78 for the memory.
Oh, wow.
So that was, I thought, a good investment. So if you're looking for a lab machine capable of running actually a good chunk of VMs, you can use this one. And then, of course, my grand present, very, very early Christmas present. Let's see where I put that little friend.
Well, it depends on your viewpoint. We've been asking for that Christmas present for a little while now.
Yeah. Yeah, this one here. I'm still waiting on more hard drives to it, but it does has a nice touch in terms of memory and CPUs. So my next test is going to be spinning up 200 VMs at the same time and see if we can push it. I know it can do 100, but I wanted to try 200 just to see if it breaks the machine or if it survives that. So more on that later. But this is also a machine I found on eBay. A little bit more expensive than the Optiplex, but heck, this was a cool lab machine. So happy, so happy.
As well, you should be. I'm looking forward to seeing what you do with it here in the coming months, for sure.
Yeah, I just hope that someone won't ruin my... I remember 2 years ago when I got the C8040s, I was so excited because they had 256 gig of memory. And back then, that was a lot for me. So like, all right, this is cool. And some jerk on Twitter, of course, posted a picture from one of their new servers that came with 3 terabytes of memory. I was like, Joa. So anyhow,
use that.
Yeah, I would not be sad to have a machine with 3 terabytes of memory. But the beautiful thing about this guy, it's quiet. I cannot hear it, and it's like 10 feet away from me. It's dead quiet. I like that a lot.
That's pretty great.
Yep. So anyhow, that's what I had in terms of updates. I see we have some comments coming in already. Bob or Robert Hatcher reminding us that Wednesday is also for Bad Batch, apparently. I'm not following that one, but I heard good things about it, so good.
Excellent.
And what else?
So we've got a few questions that have come in. I'll start with our first one over on YouTube here is, what is the Intune cache server? Can that be set up to help with Autopilot in a pre-provisioning scenario so that the PC doesn't need to download the necessary content every time from the Microsoft CDN?
To answer the second question, yes, absolutely. Microsoft has for... I like to say 4 years now, have a cache server available as part of a config manager setup that you can use for Intune. So I wrote a little piece about that a little while ago. I wrote about when it came. It wasn't called Connected Cache then. It was called Doink back in 2019. And of course, that didn't sound too great, that name. We even gave it a mascot, which was a flying pig, basically. But they renamed it to Microsoft Connected Cache. But it is indeed... I wrote a post about using it for Intune content and Autopilot content because this cache server will connect or cache anything that is delivered through delivery optimization. And Intune applications, Win32 apps, Intune applications are that kind of application that are using connected cache. So I use this to speed up deployment of really large Intune applications. or as well as, for example, during Autopilot deployment, etc. So you just spin up a VM with ConfigMgr, you enable distribution point role, and once you have that enabled, you just enable the cache server. So you don't use ConfigMgr for ConfigMgr necessarily. You just need it to get the DP so you can run the cache server. So you can have a very small environment, just the domain control on this server. That's going to be your cache server. There are online versions of this on their way that are being managed from the cloud, but they're still in private preview and has been for several years. I have no idea when they are being released, but this one works remarkably well. And the bonus here is if you guys have an Intune license, most of them, you also get ConfigMgr. So you have the license to use it. So just spin up a VM, run the cache server, and then you can force your Autopilot devices to use it, either by smacking in a registry key if you're doing that deployment yourself, or by using scope options to force machines to actually kick in and use a cache server this way. So, of course, we'll share this link together with the other stuff after the session here. But this is a good way to speed up deployment of Intune things, Windows things, if you have an office where you simply need to do a lot of deployments quickly, or if you have many large applications. So, yeah.
Good stuff. Another question on YouTube here. Can we deep dive into Intune security baselines, how to allow or disallow certain applications?
I'm assuming we're talking AppLocker here. The only thing that I've seen in that area is to basically create AppLocker policies the old way and export them and then import them into the tenant. But I don't have a ready-made demo I can show for that at the moment. Might be able to get something together for next Wednesday, but that's not something I have ready. Unless you have something, Andrew.
I don't. I feel like this question came up recently, like a week or two ago, maybe, or a similar question at least surrounding AppLocker and Intune. But no, unfortunately, I don't have anything ready at the moment.
I mean, there are a few blog posts out there on setting up. I think Peter van der Woode had one. But yeah, we can probably get something together for next Wednesday. AppLocker and Intune. I did have another question sent to me by email just before we started today. Oh, it came in yesterday actually, but I added it just before we started today. And it was regarding in CoManagement environment, how can we do troubleshooting of the communication between client and cloud? And this was in particular for the application deployment workload when being used, because this is one of the workloads that is exciting, interesting, in the way that you can actually, even though you tell the co-managed device that, hey, Intune is going to do apps, you can still deploy apps through ConfigMgr. It's pretty much the only workload that will allow these double deployments, but it also makes it interesting because now you have two basically content distribution system that can deploy apps, and if you try to deploy the same app from both platforms, well, one of them will win. So I will see if we can put something together for next Wednesday. I did not have a chance to do that today, unfortunately. Requires a bit of prep. Or you can attend one of our trainings where we have that in the lab, but that's another story. Apps into CM co-managed. Still old school, pen and paper goes a long way.
Absolutely, it does.
Yeah. All right. What else?
Another question on YouTube. Some people in our company with eligible hardware seem to be updating themselves to Windows 11. We wanted to ensure nobody can do that. What is the best way to block it? We'll do an in-place upgrade to Windows 11 using ConfigMgr feature update method later on down the road.
Yeah, I actually got an email yesterday from a customer saying the exact same thing, and I have seen being reported here and there. There is what was that workbook you implemented, Andrew, that had this controls for all the conflicting settings?
If you give me just one moment here, I can pull that up.
Do that. Did you find it?
I will. You can go ahead and share my screen. I know where it's at. Just a minute.
All right.
There we go. I got it.
All right. Let me get out of here and in here. Yeah.
So this is the Windows Update Settings Compliance Workbook posted on the MS Endpoint Manager blog that we talk about here quite frequently. Ben Whitmore presented a session around this with Arya Carley last year at MMS, and this takes a PowerShell script as a proactive remediation through Endpoint Analytics, uploads information about how your registry keys related to Windows Update are currently configured, and then puts them in a nice log analytics workbook. Sorry, uploads that information to a log analytics workspace, and then so just scroll down here a little ways. We basically get this nice workbook that visualizes not only which builds we're currently on in our environment, but make sure that our settings are configured optimally, and we get a nice red, blue, green visualization here. So this is helpful. This is something that we've used to help us find things like conflicting policies or misconfigured update policies. So this is a nice way to report on it. There may be some other ones out there, but this is the one that I've been using most commonly.
Yeah, I mean that there have been posts. I mean, even Peter's post that we shared earlier of machines accidentally being targeted with the wrong version. I have seen organizations flat right just pushing out certain registry keys just to make sure they are there, no matter what, to prevent this from happening, because it has been a little bit harder than it should be, I think, in preventing upgrades from just kicking in on devices. Or even worse, users get that full screen progress bar. It almost looked like malware when you see it the first time. It's like, you want to upgrade, like, click button here. It's like, oh, no, I do not.
Yeah, exactly. So I would check out that thread as well. As you mentioned, Johan, there are some other comments from others in the community. And I'll make sure that tweet gets added to our links here.
All right.
As well as the update, the Windows Update Settings Compliance Workbook. Well, more so, it's more than just a workbook. It's a full solution that ultimately gives you a workbook.
Yeah.
And this, because you mentioned using ConfigMgr, this does work on devices that are tenant attached and have been onboarded into Endpoint Analytics. Just wanted to specify that as well. All right. Robert mentioned, did you know that Remote Desktop Connection Manager is back via sysinternals?
Yeah, that was a happy addition when they announced that. I think it was back in either last year or maybe in 2021. Microsoft decided to decommission or deprecate the desktop manager, and then the sysinternals folks took it back, and that was in June 2021. that took over that. So that they are now getting development, there are new versions, security patches, and all that good stuff. So for those of you that are big fans of the old RDC man, by all means, get it from sysinternas and continue to use it. However, I do like to mention that my absolute favorite tool right now for remote management is this one here, which is the Remote Desktop Manager, not from Microsoft, but from Devolutions. And they have a free version of it. And this one can do much, much more than just connect to RDP. It has a good chunk of different platforms it supports. And the community version is dang good. So if you haven't tested this one, I recommend heading over here and try it out, and try out the community version, because this is, in my opinion, a superior remote management tool.
I would second that. I use it as well to your point, Johan, or to add on to your point for SSH. I even have an iDRAC tab for one of my lab servers that I keep up. So very useful tool. I love it. All right. What are the big benefits of co-management via ConfigMgr Cloud Attach from your point of view?
Oh, that question is for you, sir.
Well, co-management and tenant attach are not one and the same. Co-management, being able to pilot Intune workloads is very useful if your organization is heading that way. And I think in our experience, we're seeing more and more organizations dip their toes in the water of Intune, even longtime config manager shops. Myself included, I've been through a couple of projects now in various phases that do that very thing for the Windows Update workload. And to great success in some cases, depending on your organization. Of course, if you prefer or need the control, you can't beat ConfigMgr in that regard. But co-management gives you the opportunity to test out both types of systems. On the tenant attached side, that is very useful in that you don't have to have your devices enrolled into Intune, but it will expose your config manager managed devices in the Intune admin center and will allow you to run remote actions on those devices, as well as I mentioned with the Windows update settings compliance solution. You can also enroll those tenant attached devices into endpoint analytics and use proactive remediations.
I mean, the one big thing that I stumble across all the time, and I know you like that feature a lot also, Andrew, is the conditional access that you get as part of integrating your existing devices through CoManagement, but also have them in Azure AD, so you can take advantage of those features there. Mm-hmm. Very, very useful, because the conditional access thing that are native to Config Manager is not really worth mentioning. It's a very, very limited platform. So
absolutely. I'd say those are a few of the big ones that I can think of off the top of my head.
Remote actions, possibly.
Mm-hmm.
There are some additional functionality in Intune that you don't really have in Config Manager, like going back to an own autopilot state, or simply doing a reset of the device effectively from the console. So, I mean, F12 still works, but if you don't have any deployment solution in-house, resetting your device is second next best thing, I'm assuming. All right, good stuff.
All right, yes. All right, we've got a question about the, what do we think about specific CVE? It's the update for our Windows recovery environment. Do you force to install the update for your customers, because this issue is back to January. So we did mention there was the PowerShell script that Microsoft put out over the weekend, I think. Have you been dealing with this too much with any of your customers, Johan?
Not yet. I did some tests when the script came. It seemed to work okay in my environment at least, but I haven't worked with a customer putting it in full production yet, so I don't know.
Okay. Same. I think based on these scripts coming out, I would like to do the same, do some testing, and then start to roll out that way and get these updates out there.
Yep.
All right. Matt was asking if your new your very shiny new toy was the HP Z8 G4.
Yeah, that's the one.
Okay.
That's the one I got.
Good stuff. And then he also mentioned, I've deployed apps to iPhones, but nothing shows up in the phone side or company portal. I'm not going to be much help there. iPhone app deployment.
It's basically on question A, I would like to answer B. On the B, I don't know, but I don't work phones. I don't do phones, Androids. Through management, I have purposely stayed away from it. There are other people that are way more talented in that area than me, so I recommend reaching out to the Cloudway folks. For example, they are absolute top gurus on that on those platforms. So, yeah.
Yep. Agreed. Same here. Let's see a comment from LinkedIn. A nice comment. Thank you for your hard work putting this together. Thank you for joining us. I appreciate the kind words. We've got another question on YouTube. What is your opinion on the recent Microsoft notification that Windows devices are upgrading to a higher version than configured in the feature update policy in Intune?
Yeah, we touched that a little bit, and obviously, our opinion is that should never happen. Devices should always honor what setting you apply to them in that regard. So it's more of a bug than anything, as the way I see it. So it's not really about an opinion. If I tell a device it should not upgrade to this version of Windows, it should simply not do that. That's my opinion.
Couldn't have said it better. All right. And then another question here. Is there a way to speed up the Intune Win32 app uploads from the Intune webpage and not from Graph API using PowerShell?
Well, that particular PowerShell module that Nikolai Anderson, with some help from the community, Jose and others, put together, is indeed allowing you to update apps way more quickly. The only other option that I found, a fairly expensive option, but a valid option, I simply ordered a few Windows 365 VMs, and I upload from them. I even tried in a regular VM, an Azure VM, that I deployed in the same region as I know that my Intune tenant happened to be created in. And I uploaded from there, and I got pretty good upload speed from that one as well. It will set you back about 100 a month at best to have that system available. But the beautiful thing about the VM one is that you can just turn it off when you're not uploading apps to Intune. Whereas the Windows 365 is obviously a paid monthly fee, no matter if you use it one day or all days that week. But it didn't have to be too powerful. I went with a 16 gigs, like a medium powerful box, and I could upload things pretty quickly to Intune from that one. So I had to upload stuff to that one first, but that was quick. I just synced OneDrive, and then I upload from there to Intune. But otherwise, PowerShell is king.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. is there anything else? I don't think we missed any questions. There was one note from earlier about deleting device records if needed from re-imaging. Depends. What we found is that if you're re-imaging the same device over and over again into, for example, an autopilot state, to get that rock solid, I actually like to go in and delete those devices and wait until they're synchronized before I re-enroll that device one more time again as part of an imaging process. Technically, it actually tries to use the existing stuff if you don't delete the records, but we found it more reliable for testing machines when doing so. I hope that answered that question.
All right. We did have another question come in. I need my tech to be able to upload the hardware hash in the out-of-box experience using Git Windows Autopilot info PowerShell script, and also delete the device record from Intune if needed for reimaging. Can you show me how to create a custom role-based access, basically, for that?
I know Niehaus put together a list on how to create a custom role for that. I don't do that. I use app registrations that has the right permissions. I prefer that more when doing scripted solutions for it. But on the Office website, and I will share my screen in just a second here when I find it. If I found it.
Was that the creating a Windows Autopilot role?
That would be the one.
I found it if you want to share my screen.
I do.
This one right here.
Yeah, that one goes through the details you need if you really must have a role for it. Okay. But I do prefer to have an app registration instead. And I don't really recommend running the script with the credentials on the client side itself. I prefer to send that to a web service running somewhere secure, or an Azure function, which is secure by nature in that sense. So the credentials and that stuff is up there, not on the client making the call. It's a few extra steps that you need to configure, but it's not really that difficult. So yeah, stuff that authenticates, I try to keep away from the client side if I can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that you'll see a lot of solutions are trying to do that nowadays. The Windows Update Settings Compliance solution that I mentioned earlier, and actually a couple of solutions from the folks over there have started out with having some secrets that are on the clients and have moved over to leveraging an Azure function, for example, just to keep the secrets off the client, which I think is great stuff. And then they do some checking on the back end or verification to make sure that whatever is uploading the information is in fact trusted to do so. So
yeah,
agree to entirely.
That's that extra layer of security.
Yes. All right. Looks like we've got a couple more questions that have come in. I'll let you answer this one, Johan. Have you heard anything about ConfigMgr ADK being updated to support ARM64?
Well, ADK actually does support ARM64, the newer versions. ConfigMgr, I haven't heard a word. I would be very surprised if they would support ARM down the road. It's not really positioned as a platform that you're supposed to deploy yourself, but at the same time, they release deployable media and they have it in the ADK, so it's sort of contradicting a little bit there. But I do have, let's see if I can get rid of that one and bring up this one. I did. a guide on how to deploy it, because I bought one of these devices last year just to have something to play with. But with a bit of adding PowerShell and a bit of scripting with components from the ADK, you can absolutely deploy these devices, but you have to go back and do old school deployment because there is no sequence engine for ARM. And to answer the question again, I don't think there will be one. We'll see.
All right.
Maybe I can convince the 2 Point folks to create one for us. That would be nice.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right. What is the best way to troubleshoot a DP? I suppose where would you start if you were troubleshooting a problem on a DP?
It depends on what it is that the DP is having troubles with, but generic basic health checks on the DPs is useful, making sure that components are running as they should. And there are actually a good chunk of data points that you can gather on a DP that will tell it if it's healthy. We have showcased many times during office hours a little PowerShell script that you can run to wrong folder, of course, even wrong server. Good Lord. I should have prided myself about being pretty good at finding stuff, but this is here. This is a PowerShell script that sends out another PowerShell script to a bunch of DPs and gather data points that I found are useful to determine the health of a distribution point. We have a copy of these scripts up on the, I think, the 2 Point GitHub. Let me double check that real quick. ConfigMgr scripts. Yeah, those are the DP help script, because the customers that we work with, they even though they use a lot of peer-to-peer, they still have a few distribution points, and they kind of need to be healthy. Otherwise, we don't look good either. So anyhow, you run this script, it generates a report, and I have some early reports that I ran here back in March 10, it looks like. So if I copy that over to here, where I happen to have Excel. Oh, I had one already, even better. Here. Not that one, it's coming. Basically, where you gather information about the device and updates where it has the needed components and services running that it's supposed to have. Is it enabled for branch cache? Has it correct configuration for branch cache? What's the size of the publication cache? When was it created? Because I know there were issues a few years back where it needed to be reset, and that tells me that if I have one that is older than that update, I know that I have probably a broken cache. Sharing the same secret. I'm looking for certain event log errors that I'm reporting on, making sure I don't fill up my log files for IES, and basically as basic data points, not running out of disk space and whatnot on these machines. But yeah, these are like basic things you can do to just have a ongoing health monitoring of your distribution points. So I'll say that's a start. Other than that, it's about troubleshooting whatever issue you are facing. In general, most stuff that you do to a distribution point, if I have one of my remote DPs, I might have one of this one actually, thinking of it. Good Lord. I was just trying to open log file in PowerShell ICE, which I perfectly can, but are there better log file viewers for ConfigMgr than that?
I think there might be.
It's late in the day. I'm getting old. Anyhow, this manager log file, that's a good one to troubleshoot configuration problems and distribution of packages to the distribution point. And then, of course, we have the package transfer manager log file. If I can type, that will show you information about the site service pushing content out to a remote DP. So I would probably start there.
Right. Good stuff. Thank you, sir. This next one, I believe, is a two-parter. Any easiest way to add storage drivers to WinRE? Is there a PowerShell script that we can steal with pride? Our current existing devices can't go through the autopilot process if SATA settings are set to RAID on. We have to manually change the settings to HCI and BIOS and then autopilot a device, or AP. I assume that means autopilot.
Yeah, I actually checked in with David Segur regarding his OSD builder, but it currently does not have the functionality to add drivers into WinRE, only to WinPE. My recommendation there is actually to stop using RAID configs in BIOS and always set them to AHCI, because that removes the problem. Other than that, mounting and injecting drivers, PowerShell DISM or PowerShell running DISM is pretty much the way to go to do that. You could probably look into a little bit of that update script that Andrew showed earlier today. That also does offline updating of WinRE image to get some logic that you can borrow. So that would be a good start. But something to be very, very, very aware of these. I do not like them. These RST drivers for the RAID configurations is that the offline order matters. So in this case, HP actually was the first vendor to realize this, or at least publicly realize this, and they started to force ConfigMgr to install these RAID drivers in specific orders, because ConfigMgr always injects them alphabetically into the boot image. Because if you put a VMD version before the non-VMD versions, it will not work. It has to come in the right order. So if you script these drivers in, make sure you also script them in the right order when you add them. But yeah, I don't have a ready-made script for it, but the process is very similar. You mount the Vim file, you inject the drivers in the right order, you close the Vim file, and life is good. Hopefully.
All right. What is the best way to upgrade old Windows 7 to Windows 10 or Windows 11?
These days, if you have a Windows 7 device, I would probably recommend an F12 on that one.
Mm-hmm.
So not do an in-place upgrade. Most of our customers, when they went from 7 to 10, I worked with a good 100+ projects, and I can remember 3 of them that in the in-place upgrade route. The other 117+ customers, they did a bare metal deployment because they want to come up to a fresh state of Windows 10.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have Windows 7, that is by far the most common way to go up to Windows 10 to Windows 11 or Windows 11. Also, a device with Windows 7 now, I doubt it will be able to run Windows 11 unless it was purchased recently, but you still decided to install Windows 7 on it. A fresh reminder here that Windows 10 came in 2015. That was 8 years ago. So
can't believe it's been out for 8 years already.
I know. I know. No, but that's my take on that part.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I mean, when you go that route, at least you get, as you said, all of the new settings that should at least be there by default in Windows 10. You're not bringing a bunch of the old stuff over that was configured on Windows 7. You're much more likely to not encounter problems down the road, I would say. Good. All right. I was actually trying to find an answer on this one while you were talking through the distribution point troubleshooting. Ari asked on YouTube, the new Winget-based store apps in Intune are always throwing curveballs while installing from the company portal. Are there any network or firewall level changes that we need to do, like whitelisting-wise? I have not come across any sort of comprehensive list. I've seen some just in my brief searching here. I haven't seen anything like that, and I've not just in my travels come across a list on that. I've seen people asking a similar question without a definitive answer. Unfortunately, so. I did have, I'll at least share some troubleshooting links that I come across from Microsoft that may be of some help, but Ari, you may have seen them already. Figure it wouldn't hurt to at least share them out in our list of links. So I'm sorry, I don't have any answer on the networking side, at least, because I can't find one. All right. Where can I find WMI details on the Windows side and the best way to check all details in WMI? Couple ways to do that.
Yeah, go ahead.
PowerShell would be my first one. As we said, PowerShell is king.
Yeah.
And why am I having a brain fart right now of WMI Explorer? All I had to do is ask you, and it popped into my mind. So WMI Explorer, that tool's been around for quite some time, and is available on GitHub. I will drop the link to that in our list of links. If you'd prefer to just go that route, Johan, because we're coming up on time here.
Take that one more time. I was searching for another answer.
Oh, that's okay. I was just going to say that I can drop the WMI Explorer, the link to that tool in our list of links, since we're coming up on time here and we've got a couple more questions.
All right. Thank you.
Uh-huh. I believe Robert added this comment while you were talking about distribution point troubleshooting. What about the prereq-check.exe/dp and using the FQDN of the distribution point? I think that might just be an additional tip to what you were mentioning earlier.
I haven't seen that one being used as like checking health of a DP. Let's see if I can bring it up here. Yeah, I can share my screen. I have it up. So this was the tool that was referenced earlier. This is more before you install ConfigMgr. It's not really helpful to determine health of a distribution point. For health of your DPs, it's better to use the techniques I demonstrated earlier, or simply look into the monitoring that ConfigMgr does provide for this. There is some basic monitoring for distribution that will give you a little bit of help for your DPs. Here is an example where I have a DP that at least at some point had a setting that it didn't like and flagged it as having a trouble. Here, back in 2022, it failed to update a package, stuff like that. So, yeah.
Good stuff. What drivers do I have to add to WinPE for imaging?
Typically, network and storage are the minimal drivers that you need to add, but there are edge cases where you may have to add in other type of drivers like USB or keyboard drivers or touchpad drivers, or for some servers you may have to add mouse drivers for some of the older ILO cards and whatnot. But in like 99 of 100 driver that you need to add, it's going to be network or storage. And our recommendation, as always, is only add the stuff that you need. Just because you can find a driver pack from Lenovo, one from Fujitsu, one from HP, one from Dell, don't smack them all into the boot image, because that may make things worse, because you still have to it's going to be like a gig boot image, a gigabyte sized boot image. You typically need like 7 drivers, because WinPE these days is actually pretty dang good in its native driver support. You usually don't need to add that many more drivers.
Yeah. All right, good stuff. Totally agree. And then I think probably our last question for today: do you know of any of the best ways to find out a list of all of the Java-based web and desktop apps in an enterprise environment using SCCM or PowerShell? We are a 60K user base organization.
I mean, it may sound odd, but extending hardware inventory to grab additional classes in the registry and whatnot, that might show you what those are. If there are installed applications, that might be a solution. If you absolutely must scan for files, ConfigMgr supports it, but I don't really recommend using it, and I don't have too many customers that are using it anymore. Might be better off with CM Pivot queries or run script actions in ConfigMgr that will run in real time on the clients that enumerate content, but it's usually possible to find at least something that could identify pretty much anything that is on a device. Can be you have a baseline running that runs a fairly advanced script to find all these items, and then just outputs that into something else, a registry key that you then enumerate through inventory. I'd rather do that, I think, than doing software inventory, or the file scanning, as I call it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if maybe if you run one of the reports that actually show where Java is installed, unless you're just installing Java broadly, even on devices that didn't require it. If you weren't doing that and you were only deploying it to devices that had applications that needed it, you could at least run a report to see where Java is installed as maybe a starting point to then tack on some of those additional things that you mentioned. So
yeah,
hopefully this a couple of helpful thoughts.
Yeah. But dang, that hour flew by quickly.
Yes, it did.
Thank you, everyone that joined, and thank you, Andrew, for joining. We hope to see you again next Wednesday, and until then, have a great rest of your day, week.
Yeah. Thank you for having me, and thank you everybody for joining us. Have a great one.